All right, so let's get right into it. For decades, right, there's been this one name, a name that's just been whispered in the corridors of power in Tehran. You almost never see this guy in public, but he's absolutely central to the regime's deepest, darkest secrets. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that very figure, MOJTABA KHAMENEI.
Okay, just picture this for a second. The year is 2026, March. Iran is completely reeling, it's locked in this devastating war, and then, bam. The unthinkable happens. A U.S.-Israeli airstrike takes out the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Just like that, the state is decapitated, right at its absolute most vulnerable moment.
I mean, this creates a massive power vacuum. The country's under attack, the leader is gone, so what's the most critical question? The only question that matters. Who on earth is going to take his place?
And the answer comes fast. And it doesn't come from some public debate or a constitutional process. No, it comes from the security state itself. The successor, it's his own son, MOJTABA KHAMENEI. Now, this is a guy who's had immense, incredible influence, but he spent his entire life deliberately operating in the shadows.
And believe me, his reputation precedes him. I mean, just listen to this from Dr. Eric Mandel. He says that MOJTABA isn't just some powerful figure. Nope. He's widely seen as one of the architects of the regime's repression. We're talking about the guy behind some of the most brutal crackdowns.
So you got to be asking, how does a guy like this, a man in the shadows, suddenly come to power? Well, that all happens right here, in our first section, a wartime succession.
And let's be super clear. This was not a normal constitutional process, not even close. When you're in the middle of a war, your priority isn't debating things, it's speed. It's absolute control, and that decision was dictated entirely by Iran's security apparatus.
So why him? Why MOJTABA?
Well, the IRGC, that's the super powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they looked at the situation and saw him as pretty much the only guy who could tick all the right boxes. He could guarantee stability, he could keep the military's chain of command solid, and maybe most importantly, he could stop a chaotic, messy power scramble among all the other elites. For the regime's hardliners, he was the safe bet. He was continuity.
But really, to get how he ended up in this position, you have to understand the man himself. So let's talk about the man in the shadows.
His life story, really, it explains everything about his power base. So, he was born back in '69, and his whole childhood was pretty much defined by his father's rise as a revolutionary. Then in the '80s, he actually fought in the Iran-Iraq War, and this is key, he forged these lifelong bonds with the guys who would one day be running Iran's security services. Then, when his dad became supreme leader in '89, he starts his clerical studies and eventually ends up studying under some of the most arch-conservative, hardline clerics you can find.
And here's the thing that's just so wild. Despite being totally immersed in the system his whole life, he's never held a formal government job. Not one. No cabinet posts, nothing. His power is completely 100% informal. It was all built from the inside out.
So, if he never had an official title, how in the world did he get to be so powerful? Well, that brings us right to our next section, the Power Broker's Playbook.
Okay, let's break down how he did it. Step 1, he basically ran things out of his father's office, the Beit, acting as the ultimate gatekeeper. If you wanted to get to his dad, you had to go through him. Step 2, he used those old war buddies, those connections, to build incredible loyalty inside the IRGC. Step 3, he allegedly used that power to shape election results. Think 2005 and 2009. And finally, Step 4, he's widely believed to have orchestrated the brutal crackdowns on dissent, like the 2009 Green Movement. See, that's the playbook. That's what made him absolutely indispensable.
And look, this isn't just rumor or speculation. This is real. The U.S. Treasury itself, when they sanctioned him, said that the supreme leader had delegated leadership responsibilities to MOJTABA. They even pointed out how closely he works with the IRGC's Quds Force and the Bajij, the regime's street-level enforcers. And you know what comes with that kind of power? Money. A lot of money. His personal fortune is allegedly somewhere around $3 billion, and that's spread out in assets all over the world. UAE, Syria, Venezuela, you name it.
But listen to this. That $3 billion, that's just his personal slice of the pie. The financial empire his father's office controls, this thing called ICO, is valued at a mind-blowing $95 billion. And as one of the main guys in that office, MOJTABA had his hands all over the controls of this massive economic engine.
So all of this brings us to a huge problem.
because this whole succession thing, it is anything but straightforward. Let's call this section a controversial inheritance.
Okay, here's problem number 1, and it's a big one. Iran's constitution is pretty clear. The supreme leader has to be a top-tier religious authority, a grand ayatollah. MOJTABA? Well, he's not one. He just doesn't have the rank. So without that religious street cred, his appointment isn't just shaky constitutionally, it lacks real deep-seated legitimacy.
And that leads to this massive ideological contradiction. I mean, think about it. The entire point of the 1979 revolution was to get rid of a monarchy, to end hereditary rule. And now, here we are watching power get passed down from father to son. It looks a whole lot like the very thing they supposedly overthrew.
So he takes power, and his legitimacy is already in question from day one. He is immediately facing this huge existential choice. Does he fight or does he fold?
Now, to really understand the choice he's facing, you have to get the regime's #1 rule, its prime directive. It was laid down by the founder, Khomeini himself. Preserving the system is the highest duty. What that really means is, regime survival comes first, always. It trumps everything else.
So his options are just stark. On one hand, he can fight. He can continue the war, use everything he's got, missiles, drones, proxies, and go for revenge for his father's death. Or, on the other hand, he can fold. He can actually follow Khomeini's prime directive, prioritize saving the regime itself, and accept massive concessions to just stop the war.
But man, the price of folding would be absolutely breathtaking. We're talking about ending the nuclear program for good, accepting permanent limits on their missiles, cutting loose that whole regional network of proxies, ending the confrontation with Israel. I mean, in short, he'd have to tear down the entire strategic legacy that his father spent 37 years building. And here's the grim reality. Whichever path he takes, fight or fold, it doesn't really matter. What he's inheriting is a country on the absolute brink. The economy is a wreck, the government is hollowed out and corrupt, and the public, they are furious. There's this huge chasm of anger between the people and the regime. So MOJTABA KHAMENEI begins his rule standing in the ruins of his father's world. The ultimate question then isn't just about him anymore, it's about the entire system. In the face of all this, is it even possible for the system he now leads to survive?